Where do you think you're going?
Everything's already set up. Remakes. It feels like, at least to me, that word has become kind of like a dirty word, or a word with like much more negative connotation when applied to a movie within like film discussion and filmmaking and criticism online than I think it deserves. People come in to a movie that is a remake with their minds already made up. And that observation leads me to something that kind of annoys me about modern day film criticism and discussions online, which is kind of like how like toxic, jaded, misinformed, prejudgmental film commentary online has gotten. Maybe it's just me, but it seems that so many people and film critics and like people who discuss movies online are way too okay with making up their minds on a project well before it's come out and like just fully judging a book by its cover. I mean, look at what's happening with Ironheart right now. And like that kind of perspective growing has led to what I find are like these mainstream film snobbish weird generalizations people use to just instantly write a movie off. Things like all CGI bad, Hollywood's out of ideas, nothing original is ever made anymore, superhero fatigue, we need to stop making this type of movie because people are tired of it. And of course, leave old movies alone, all remakes bad, never remake anything. I'm sorry if that comes off as like, I don't know, dismissive, but if you're not gonna watch a movie, or at the very least like look up something about its production and how it was made to at least talk about it with some authority, I'm tired of hearing people just criticize things without ever engaging with it. I think if a filmmaker has what they think is a cool, unique, interesting idea or story they want to tell, and it's based off of or a remake of an old property or whatever, I don't care if the green light for its production was a cash grab. If they think they can do it, if they think they have the right writers, the correct cast and production staff and everything, they should be allowed to shoot their shot. I have no problem with that, and I don't know why people seem to write things off from announcement now. So with all of that preamble, I've hopefully edited together in a coherent, enjoyable way. Let's get on to the purpose of this video, which is actually an idea I've had for a long time, which I always thought it would be fun to try to objectively watch an original film or like a classic film and its remake and compare and contrast them, like see what the strengths and weaknesses of both are, whether one is better than the other, whether they're kind of like the same, whether one is obviously worse than the other. You know, things go both ways. Like you never know how it's going to turn out. So this video, I picked what I had hoped would be 3 movies that run the gambit from just as good as the original to maybe worse than the original, but still justifies its own existence and is totally great in its own right, to better than the original. So let's see if that shakes out, if I have good examples of each one of those. But I don't know. Who knows? I do, because I've seen all of these movies and I have a script written, but you don't yet. So without further ado, let's get into our first example of comparing the original and the remake, Evil Dead. Now, I'm not so deluded that I'm going to sit here and try to make the claim that the Evil Dead remake is better than the original Evil Dead. You know, one of the top 10 greatest movies ever made and possibly the greatest horror movie of all time. But I will say the Evil Dead remake is a damn fine horror movie in its own right, fully justifies its own existence, and may be one of the best horror movies made in like the last 20 years. Might as well just start jumping into this, and before we go ahead, I might as well just say full spoilers for everything going forward. These movies are old. Their remakes are also kind of old at this point too. So, you know, if you haven't seen them and any of them have sparked any sort of interest in you, I say just, you know, check them out. They're all good movies. They're all worth a watch for sure. While I like to think everyone already knows the plot of the original Evil Dead and perhaps its remake, I can't assume that, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and do like a nice little story and plot summary of the original, the story plot summary of the remake, and then we can go ahead and do a nice YouTube criticism, commentary, video essay thing and compare and contrast them, you know, like the whole thesis of this video is. So yeah. So the original Evil Dead begins with 5 Michigan State college students made up of Ash, his girlfriend Linda, sister Cheryl, Ash's best friend Scott, and Scott's girlfriend Shelly. And these 5 are driving out into the remote cabin in the woods for a nice weekend getaway of college fun. You know, pretty cliche, but this was the first movie to really popularize that. A real genre-defining setup, like, for real. You know, everyone gets to the cabin and starts making themselves comfortable. There are some subtle things and hints that, like, there's something off here, like when they first get there and the swinging bench is banging against the cabin unnaturally, you know, good stuff like that. And, you know, after fully warming up to the cabin and, you know, everyone getting comfortable in there and hanging out, one of my favorite horror scenes happens where they're all just talking and then in the background, and that jump scare, like, hit me hard as the kid when that cellar door opened. Oh, so good. And of course, that tempts our 2 male leads, Ash and Scott, into the basement where those 2 characters come across a very evil-looking book and a recording of a professor studying said book who reads an enchantment from the book under a recorder that Scott...
No big deal.
Tatra amistrobin hazarta. Tatir mano.
Summoning a demon, obviously, and a type of demon that we will eventually lovingly call a deadite. The movie becomes a classic, you summoned a demon by speaking the words you never should have spoke, and that demon starts systematically possessing and killing everybody one by one. Great premise, first movie to do it, awesome. And so after the words are spoken, Cheryl is the first one possessed after I don't know exactly actually how well this will age for modern audiences, but she does get, and this is going to sound weird, I don't even know how much I can even show, essayed by possessed evil trees. But yeah, from there, you know, essentially her body and soul has been claimed by the demon, and we get her full possession in what is also another one of my favorite horror scenes of all time.
Spades. Queen of spades. 4 of hearts. 8 of spades. 2 of spades. Jack of diamonds. Jack of clubs.
God, I hope I can show that scene. I love that. It's so good. And instead of immediately killing Cheryl, like in most movies, which is kind of interesting, they force her into the basement and lock it up. But not before stabbing Linda in the ankle with a pencil. And after that, while everyone's like kind of scattered and freaked out, paranoid, not really knowing what to do, Cheryl ends up alone, and some unseen force crashes through the window and fully possesses her. And so there you go, 2 people down. And from there you get a nice little, you know, action set piece attack sequence. Defending himself, Scott like slashes her wrist, stabs her with a demon looking dagger, and then brutally like butchers her into pieces with an axe. And then him and Ash do the only thing the shell-shocked personalities can do, and that's bury her out in the front yard. And then from there, Scott makes a decision, which I kind of like, which is interesting, and that's he's going to try to get out of the woods and make his way to safety, leaving Ash there alone, unfortunately, him and Linda, whose ankle is still fucked from that pencil.
Listen to me. Linda cannot walk with her leg like that. She can't even stand up.
Well, then we'll leave her here. Until we can send somebody back.
What are you, crazy?
Look, I'm getting out.
But yeah, right after Scott leaves, before Ash can even really think about what to do next, Scott comes back immediately, like, mortally wounded, screaming about how the trees won't let them leave, which is also horrifying. Like, you cannot escape. You're done. And after everything with Scott, Ash returns to check on Linda, only to find that that wound that she was given is really spread, and now she's fully possessed and gone too, leaving Ash as our final man and like one of the greatest horror icons in all of film history, hands down. But after finding Linda possessed, Ash and her have a whole extended set piece sequence where she chases him around and he eventually is forced to decapitate her with a shovel after not being able to fully dismember her and trying to just bury her in the yard. And then her headless body attempts to grape him, which is interesting and extra fucked up and horrific. But then she eventually fully dies, and Ash retreats back into the cabin where Cheryl has escaped from the cellar, and now he has to do battle with her, which he does. And then eventually Scott is revealed to be possessed and has to do battle with him. And then all of the possessed people throughout the movie all come back for one final big fight against Ash. And in that final confrontation, it leads to Ash eventually grabbing the Necronomicon, or the Book of the Dead, throwing it into the fire, and as it burns, all the demons around him melt like the witch from The Wizard of Oz, but just so much more beautifully gory. And then he wanders outside to sunrise, and you think it's all good, only for the invisible POV Raimi Cam demon to smack him and possess him into credits. That was my quick run and gun plot summary of the first Evil Dead. Now let's get to the next Evil Dead, the remake, which is also a group of 5 college-age 20-something people made up of Mia, her brother David, and then their acquaintances Eric, Olivia, and Natalie. And they're all going out to a cabin in the woods to help Mia detox from her heroin addiction, which is already, completely different premise, completely different setup, but an interesting take and a nice change in motivation for why all these people are out into a cabin and isolating themselves. And then from there, the opening act kind of plays similar to the original, where everyone kind of settles into the cabin, and Mia is the one specifically kind of targeted by some weird evil presence that's already there. Oh, which the remake, I forgot, establishes that there should be some weird presence at this cabin, because unlike the original movie, the remake opens with the implication that this book and these demons have been possessing people for a long time, and you see the ramifications or the end point of someone else's story fucking with the book. So yeah, I appreciate that. I don't mind that. And it also lets you know that this movie is going for in-your-face hardcore extreme horror. We're cranking it to 11. As everyone settles in, as I said before, they eventually discover the basement, and there's like blood marks and a weird smell coming from it. Unlike the cellar door just opening itself as a jump scare in the first movie. So, the remake follows similar plot beats, but it doesn't just recreate the exact same jump scares and character motivations and character stuff. So, it kind of is going to sound way too George Lucas-y of me, but the movies kind of rhyme in their script writing, where at the right points, oh, this beat happens, which kind of matches up to the original, but it's different, which I can appreciate. I'm not going in and knowing exactly what's going to happen throughout the entire movie. And this time, Eric finds the Necronomicon while out in the basement, and he's implied to be some English teacher, which explains his motivation to really crack in and open up the book and read about it. And I do got to give the remake props. I like how their Necronomicon, while obviously not looking as overtly evil, is presented much more ominous and threatening, like the way it's wrapped in plastic and covered in barbed wire. And I love the way it's designed with all the lettering and people trying to scribble it out and have clearly been trying to fuck with the book because they've had bad experiences with it. There's a whole history there. I can appreciate that. I really like that. And after he directly reads the words instead of playing a recording, like I said, same but different, Eric summons the nice good old Sam Raimi POV demon cam, which hits Mia, and we actually get, and I was surprised they did this when I saw this in theaters because of modern day sensitivities and all that. They do their best to recreate the tree essay from the original movie, but they do it much more like A24, Hereditary tastefully in this, where it's this really well done effect and a vine, and it's while Mia is looking in the eyes of what is clearly a demonic thing that's summoned and taken her form. which I believe the script calls the Abomination, but it's never said in the movie. But if you hear me call anything the Abomination, I'm referring to that. And then we get a nice little something is off with Mia escalation of behavior where she starts acting weird. Everyone is able to kind of write off the strange behavior as her going through crazy heroin withdrawals, which is interesting, but it doesn't stop her brother from trying to leave with her after she horrifically burns herself with boiling water, which you also see in the book. And that's another thing the remake does, which some remakes do and mess it up, where they add in extra lore. And I would argue that it really doesn't have much more lore drop than the original, actually, because the original also has the Sumerian dagger and all the stuff with the professor. Anyway, this one has clearly some ritual the demons are trying to accomplish that you see told throughout the movie. And then from here, we get what is a lovely showcase of a deadite possessing everybody and killing them off one by one in gruesome ways, and just an extravaganza of some of the best practical in-camera effects with subtle CGI enhancements you will ever see. Like, there's so much in this movie that I'm like, man, how the hell did they do that? And obviously, it's YouTube. I can't show too much gore, but hopefully I can show this one scene, and I believe this anecdote is real. And it's the scene where Mia, fully possessed, grabs Olivia, I believe, and like gets on top of her and vomits on her face, right? And it's like projectile vomiting coming out. And apparently the way that worked is on the other side of the camera, so on this side of her mouth, there was like a tube, like her cheek was kind of pulled back, and there was a tube that went in kind of down her throat a bit and then pointed back out, that they were able to pump the practical vomit like that out of her actual mouth. I don't know. I have like an extra love for this movie just from the lengths they went through to pull off some of these like amazing effects. But yeah, from there, everybody gets possessed and, you know, dies one by one. And then the remake actually draws a cool parallel, or draws some interesting lore from the second Evil Dead movie, where David can't bring himself to dismember Mia after knocking her out, and so he buries her, which seems to be part of the lore of the book, where in order to save someone's soul after possession, you have to bury them, burn them, or dismember them. And so David does that to Mia. He buries her, and so she dies suffocated, you know, under dirt, but then manages to resurrect her with like a homemade defibrillator, which, okay, sure, unrealistic, whatever, I'm willing to buy it. And you actually get someone cured from demon possession, and actually Mia becomes the final girl, which is another thing I like. Like, the movie kind of gives the impression that you think David's gonna be like the new Ash, but then no, he brings Mia back only to immediately get got, become the last soul that the Deadites need to try to summon the Abomination, leaving Mia to be your final girl for the third act. And a third act that I also absolutely love, as this cat and mouse game between Mia and the Abomination, as she like desperately tries to avoid it, and it tries to kill her to like reap her body and like fully become to Earth and become fully powered. And Mia obviously defeats it after, again, a reference to the second movie, loses her hand, chainsaws the Abomination straight down in one of my favorite shots with like the cabin behind her burning. And from there, you know, lives, and the movie ends. And unfortunately, we never got a full continuation of that story. I would love that someday. We did get Evil Dead Rise, which I like, but not nearly as much as the original Evil Dead, and not nearly as much as Evil Dead 2, and not nearly as much as the remake. And the reason I say that is because, here's a quick tangent for Evil Dead Rise. I was really excited for that movie. I really loved the idea of taking an Evil Dead movie and setting it in an apartment complex in downtown LA, which is what I thought it was, which is what all the posters pitched and what all the production, you know, news about it was. And then you go and you watch the movie, and it all takes place on one hallway with like 5 apartments, primarily all in one apartment. So even though you gave me the promise of an Evil Dead movie in the middle of a city, it still ended up just feeling and looking and being another cabin in the woods Evil Dead movie, essentially. So that was a little disappointing. But yeah, it's still a fine movie. Yeah, I guess those are the quick plot summaries, and I probably gushed too much for the remake because I do love the original much more. And let's get into that and comparing them and why. Something to understand about the original Evil Dead, which I personally fully respect and love, which is that it was an early 80s movie made by a bunch of film students, like young film school guys. Sam Raimi, who is now one of the best filmmakers of our time, in my opinion. And Bruce Campbell, you know, a classic Hollywood actor that I would love to see in like a bigger role in something. I mean, well, you know, I shouldn't say that. I'm besmirching his career. I love him in Burn Notice. You know what? Fuck me saying that. He's in so much iconic shit. That was a dumb thing of me to say. Love Bruce Campbell. But yeah, so these guys, you know, just for the love of the game, making their first project, just got some money together after making a short film to convince some investors to invest in them. Went out into the middle of the woods in, I want to say Tennessee or Kentucky. I'll put the correct state if I'm wrong in big bold text here, but it's one of those. And they went out there, and their goal was to just try to make the scariest film they possibly could. And I think they definitely succeeded. I think a lot of what that movie does will hold up the test of time. Like, you could show a teenager or a kid that is like not familiar with horror movies today, and they would still be scared. They might be more viscerally affected by the remake more, just because, you know, filmmaking techniques got better, so by nature of that, it looks more realistic. There's just something about the atmosphere and the presentation and everything about the original that just hits a little harder. Like, the original Evil Dead sets up so many like horror cliches and storytelling tools that people still utilize to this day. And so those are all the merits of the original Evil Dead. How does that compare to the remake? And what I really love about the Evil Dead remake is that it is very much like in the exact same kind of spirit as the original, which is Fede Alvarez, the director that Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell kind of handpicked to make this. And his whole motivation with his script and gathering these resources and actors and everything was to emulate what Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell did all those years ago, which is, with these filmmaking resources gathered, let's go out into the woods to a cabin and make the scariest goddamn movie we possibly can. And I think with that goal in mind, he well accomplished that. And yes, while as much as I will say I love Mia, none of her and none of the other characters are nearly as memorable as Bruce Campbell. But again, you know, how do you do that? How do you replicate that? How do you replicate a person? Like, you can't, and I can appreciate the remake for not trying. I can appreciate that they said that's probably near impossible unless we bought back Bruce Campbell and aged him down, which no. So they tried to create their own iconic final girl, and I think they did. I love Mia. Not as much as Ash, but I think she's great. I like that she goes from heroin addict desperately trying to improve her life to possessed by a demon to losing everything and then saying, fuck that, I'm gonna fight, and fighting for her life and making it out of there. I don't know. There's something great about that story. And I think the Evil Dead remake does something that I think a really good remake of something should do, which is, you know, trying to rhyme and kind of be in step with the original, but not fully recreate everything. It's like a choose your own adventure story. It's like I'm seeing like the same setup. I want to kind of see the similar setup, maybe a similar scenario to the original, but maybe this character realizes this happens at this point instead of this other point, which causes this different thing to happen in the story. Or maybe it's a group of friends trying to help their friend kick heroin and not just a bunch of college kids driving out into the woods to party. You know, like subtle differences where you take the premise or the idea and then you're like, but what if it like happened here in this scenario in this time, or with this type of people, or they made this decision causing this effect. And the Evil Dead remake is that in the best ways, in my opinion. It doesn't eclipse the original, but it is damn close to being one of the best horror movies of like the modern century, for sure. Right? That's century. The 2000s started a new century. Yeah. Well, let's just say 25 years. So looking at the timeline, I've kind of just been recording and talking and rambling for 55 minutes. Hopefully, I've edited that down into some sort of cohesive, enjoyable presentation of why I think that the Evil Dead original is a fantastic classic film. The Evil Dead remake is a fantastic classic contemporary horror film that fully justifies its existence, and I'm so glad that those filmmakers were given the attempt and not immediately just told, all remakes bad. I think that the attitude when it came out and a lot of reviews and a lot of people's initial impression of it was with that in mind, where people were very much sour on remakes and going into movies like this with the immediate downer of, well, it's a remake, it can't be good. But, you know, I wholeheartedly disagree, as this whole video is the point of. Ooh, yeah. Evil Dead original and the Evil Dead remake. Watch those movies. They're great. Super good double feature. And hopefully to stop repeating myself, because I think I've been doing that, let's move on to the next movie, Fright Night. So this is going to be interesting. With Fright Night, okay, in the opening premise of this video, I said the statement that I was trying to find maybe 3 movies that ran the gambit of not better than the original, but a fantastic movie nonetheless and justifies its own existence, to just as good as the original, to better than the original. And I had hoped, because honestly, with Fright Night and the next movie we talk about, I hadn't seen those movies since I was a teenager. And in rewatch for this movie, even though in my head I was like, oh, these 3 movies might line up with that idea. Like I said, having rewatched them for this video, I like the Fright Night remake like a lot more than the original. I'm sorry. This might be a controversial opinion, but don't hate me. I guess let's get into this controversial opinion. Real quick, let's throw into a plot summary of the original and the remake, and hopefully I don't over ramble and over detail that part like I think I did for Evil Dead. But yeah, let's let's jump into that. So if I'm going to go into this discussion, I might as well jump in with a kind of general plot summary of the original 1985 Fright Night and then the remake, and, you know, compare and contrast. Probably don't need to keep reiterating that, but I don't know. I guess I will. So this original Fright Night deals with our main character, Charlie, his girlfriend, Amy, his best friend, Evil Ed, and Charlie's fandom obsession with TV show host, Peter Vincent. So this original 1985 Fright Night begins with Charlie hanging out in his bedroom with his girlfriend, Amy, and they're watching / making out to a local local public access horror show, Peter Vincent. I guess kind of like an Elvira type television personality, or I guess like a Kolchak, the Night Stalker type TV show, something like that. And while that show's playing in the background and they're paying half attention to it and he's making out with Amy, he notices a new neighbor moving in the house across the street. And through the window, he sees what he thinks is like a coffin being moved into the basement. And of course, that makes him like suspicious and is like, oh, that's intriguing. I'm gonna check that out. And then, completely blows his chance to potentially lose his virginity to his girlfriend, Amy. And this might sound random, but it is plot relevant. It is a Chekhov's gun that comes back up at the end.
Charlie, I said stop it!
Jesus, Amy, give me a break. We've been going together almost a year, and all I ever hear is Charlie, stop it.
And after meeting the vampire across the street, Jerry, his name's Jerry, and Jerry's thrall / human servant, Billy, Charlie unsuccessfully tries to convince his mother what's going on, and she's like typical 1980s, teenage kid at home, absentee parent, dismissive of it. Like almost every horror movie from that time. And the first act or portion of Fright Night actually kind of plays like Rear Window and or Disturbia for maybe younger audiences watching. Essentially, yeah, he is spying on his neighbor that he believes is a vampire responsible for the disappearances of a bunch of women in town. His girlfriend Amy and his best friend Evil Ed start to think that Charlie is like losing his sanity, and because he starts talking about vampires and trying to find proof, and they're like, yo, what's up with this? And after being taunted, by Jerry, and Jerry revealing he is a vampire, and what can you do, kid? Like, haha. Charlie desperately goes to the only, I guess, vampire expert he can think of, because I have to remember to stop watching movies with the context of I have the internet. So yeah, he goes to the only resource he can think of at the time, which is Peter Vincent, the horror host that claims to be an expert on vampires every night. And of course, when he goes to Peter Vincent, Charlie comes off like a loon, and Peter immediately dismisses him and is like, who is this crazy person? What the hell's going on? I'm just a TV show host that just got fired. My show's canceled. And so, upon that happening, Charlie kind of has like a breakdown, being like, it's all up to me, and this vampire, once the sun goes down tonight, is definitely gonna fuck with me. Which is actually interesting, because that means like the movie takes place only over like a couple days type, short time frame movie. And I appreciate stories like that. But after failing to get help from Peter Vincent and kind of having a breakdown and going home and trying to figure out like a plan for the night and what to do to defend himself, Amy and Evil Ed go to Peter Vincent and pay him a punchline's worth amount of money to come with them and go bring Charlie to the neighbor, Jerry, and Peter Vincent will hopefully feed into Charlie's delusions and then tell Charlie that this guy isn't a vampire, and Charlie's insanity and breakdown will hopefully subside or be lessened because, from their perspective, Charlie's losing his mind, which, fair enough. But it does, fall into the cliche that I do find a little annoying personally, or at least maybe not annoying, but just not satisfying to watch, which is a character going through a state of he knows something's true, the audience knows something's true, but everyone around him won't believe him or listen to him, and he fumbles multiple chances to like just say the right thing at the right time to maybe get someone on his side, which is a little frustrating, but that's just, I guess, an aspect of a lot of horror movies back then. Honestly, it's becoming less and less of a thing today, which I appreciate. But after roping Peter Vincent and kind of forcing Charlie over to Jerry's house, there's a whole scene where Charlie is very on edge and scared, and everyone else is like, oh, this guy's not a vampire, and they throw holy water at Jerry, and it doesn't work, and Jerry's fine. And then Peter Vincent happens to pull out an old mirror and notices that Jerry doesn't have a reflection in the mirror, and so finally you do get a little bit of relief of another character seeing the truth, which is nice. It's a good moment. It feels good for the audience. It's a bit cathartic. But Peter Vincent is also a little bitch, so he immediately nopes the fuck out of there and is like, no, I'm done, and leaving Amy, Evil Ed, and Charlie in the wind as they walk back home. And while out that night, they eventually split up from Evil Ed, and Jerry actually corners Evil Ed, Charlie's best friend, and turns him into his vampire servant, which is nice, And Jerry is the classic, almost like Bram Stoker, like Hammer film type Dracula vampire.
Are you
saying
this is some kind of
it's some sort of Dracula?
Dracula?
Classic, like turns into a bat, can appear as mist and fog and like materialize in it, hypnotizes you with his eyes. And after being turned, I guess Jerry or Ed takes it upon himself to head to Peter Vincent and try to kill him because Jerry clocked that Peter knows what's going on now. Or wait. Maybe I just realized the plot hole? I guess if I'm remembering this right. Let me check. Yeah, I think I'm remembering this right. So yeah, after Ed gets turned, he then attacks Peter Vincent, who then manages to ward Ed off with a crucifix. Or maybe it's because it's a silver crucifix that it manages to burn Ed's forehead and like scare him, shoo him away. And from there, Peter is, fully into like, oh shit, like I either gotta man up or be a bitch. And he does eventually man up, it is a movie, character growth. But the reason I said maybe there was a plot hole is because eventually Charlie and Amy are desperately trying to get away from Jerry, and Jerry is obsessed with Amy because for some reason Amy looks like his old lover and might be the reincarnation of her. Just something the movie throws in there. I don't know. And so he's obsessed with getting Charlie's girlfriend, and he does, and enthralls her and bites her, and now I guess the only way to cure her is to kill Jerry before the vampirism fully takes her over. But back to the plot hole. So yeah, Peter Vincent manages to get Evil Ed to go away with his crucifix, only for later when him and Charlie bust into Jerry's house to rescue Amy, Peter tries to ward Jerry off with a crucifix, only for Jerry to reveal that the crucifix only works if you believe. And so then, Charlie comes up with his crucifix and is like, well, I believe, bitch. And then Jerry's like, oh, shit. But if it didn't work for Peter in that moment, why did it work in the previous scene? I mean, unless that cross was silver? Peter and Charlie manage to come together really quick, and before Amy fully transforms, bust out a bunch of the blacked out windows of the house and expose Jerry to all the sunlight, all the purifying sunlight, and he is destroyed. Amy is cured. Holy shit, they went on this whole horror vampire adventure. And as it does tie back into the first scene, Charlie and Amy finally get together and lose their virginities to each other in a very weird 80s thing that the whole movie has kind of been leading to and been subtly about, I guess. And it's weird, in my opinion. But that's the original Fright Night. Now let's get into the plot of the remake, which, as I said, I'm sorry, I like more. Right off the bat, an interesting change in the remake is that they move the location of the story. I believe the first movie was like the suburbs of California or the Midwest, something like that. But the remake takes place in like the outer artificial suburbs of Vegas, where people kind of move through a lot, and there's a lot of like overnight workers on the Vegas Strip because that's only when construction can be done and things like that. And the other big change that this movie makes is you start with a scene that lets you know right out the gate that this is going to be a much more like violent, edgy vampire type movie. Whereas like the first original Fright Night kind of reflected the Hammer type vampires and like the old classic Gothic vampires, this movie is much more a reflection of, the late 90s, early 2000s, 2010s vampire, which was like 30 Days of Night and violent and bloody and more of a monster, but still sexy. They got Colin Farrell. And so, yeah, the opening scene is a kid and his family getting killed by a vampire. And also this movie makes some character changes so that the relationships aren't exactly one-to-one. Like Evil Ed and Charlie in this movie used to be best friends, but now Charlie like has a girlfriend, has kind of moved on to a different social circle, and Ed feels kind of like left behind by that, and also is mad at Charlie when he doesn't notice that their other friend from middle school, Adam, disappeared, the guy killed in the first scene. And Evil Ed confronts Charlie with his theory that there is a vampire in their neighborhood that is systematically like killing everyone, and he needs Charlie's help to prove it or stop him.
This is nuts. I really hate to be the one to tell you this, but that guy, your neighbor, yeah, he's a vampire, man.
My neighbor.
Yeah.
Next door.
Yeah.
Jerry, I just met him.
Okay, Jerry.
That is a terrible vampire name. Jerry?
I didn't name him, man. I'm just reporting the facts.
And what I like about this is that Evil Ed, actually played by McLovin, aka Christopher Mintz-Plasse, and Charlie, I should mention, rest in peace, is played by Anton Yelchin. Whoever was the casting director for this did an amazing job. You have Colin Farrell as Jerry the Vampire, Toni Collette as the mother, Imogen Poots as Amy, and David Tennant as Peter Vincent. But back on track, after Evil Ed kind of forces Charlie to help him investigate Adam's house after being like, I have old footage of us in cosplay. I'll leak it online. They investigate Adam's house only to see that everything's gone and like the house is clean. And after having a fight about what happened to their friendship, they split up here. You know, we're only like maybe 10 minutes into the movie. And on his way home alone, Evil Ed gets confronted by Jerry, and you actually start off the movie with an extended sequence of him getting chased, and it's actually a fun, you know, well-made cat and mouse game with Jerry, Colin Farrell, just playing with his food essentially. And
Get it, Jerry. No invitation, you can't get in. Oh shit.
Abandoned. I thought you did your homework.
it's kind of great, and eventually corners Evil Ed and turns him pretty much immediately in this movie. You're not seeing the exact same story. You're seeing that same concept, just, you know, in a different place and time, and maybe different character decisions and choices, and I liked that. And the next day, when Charlie realizes that Evil Ed has not shown up to school, he gets worried and starts thinking that maybe there is something up with his neighbor, and starts, you know, again, like Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf, just kind of starts spying on him. Eventually notices him bring what he thinks is a prostitute into his house and hears a scream that wakes him up. You actually get this whole sequence where Charlie sees Jerry leave, and he then, you know, goes into his house and discovers what he thinks is like a serial killer portion, where he has that sex worker trapped in a, you know, locked closet and has been feeding off her, and she's shell-shocked. But then Jerry comes home, and you have, again, another great sequence where Charlie and Jerry, you think, are, I guess, playing a cat and mouse game where Jerry doesn't notice he's there, and Charlie's trying to sneak out with the sex worker, and successfully does, only for, you know, the filmmaking and the camera choices to reveal that Jerry knew he was there the whole time. And you get a great scene where you think he saved this woman, only to... No, that's a great reveal that his infection is by bite, like 30 Days of Night. This isn't, like I said, this isn't gothic vampire. This is infection, evil. He is a shark type vampire. And of course, with everything confirmed, oh, and also I like the relationship that Charlie has with Amy. It is well done, in my opinion. It feels natural. They have good chemistry. I want to see them end up together. And she also doesn't just blow him off as insane and like dismisses everything he's saying, which is something that I like in the remake. Like, Charlie eventually confronts his mom with his information. Like, I think he's a vampire. He's a dangerous man. Don't let him inside. And he comes and tries to get inside the house. And Toni Collette, you know, listens to her son and doesn't just blow off his insane ramblings. It's like, maybe this guy is dangerous. I'm not going to let him in. I like that. I like when movies write parents that way, or write characters that way, where they don't just dismiss someone they should trust. But, you know, after I just skipped ahead a lot, but after Charlie's, you know, come to vampire moment and he realizes this is all real, the movie has been showing you in the background that there is a Chris Angel type performer in Vegas who his entire show is vampire themed. He claims to be a vampire expert, even on his website, and Evil Ed even says that a lot of his research came from Peter Vincent's show website. So Charlie manages to sneak in to the Vegas casino and get to Peter Vincent's penthouse and ask him for help. And I do really like David Tennant's Peter Vincent. I like the scene where like he has the whole Chris Angel makeup, but then as he's like walking through his penthouse, he like takes it all off and you see it is David Tennant. I don't know, it's great. And David Tennant does like cowardly piece of shit, but still entertaining and great to watch really well. And of course, you know, the beginning of the movie, Peter implies that he does know that vampires are real, but he's terrified of them. They fucked with his family and his past, and he wants nothing to do with Charlie, and, you know, gives him the boot. And so then Charlie has to go home as the sun's coming down, and he gets home with no help, and the thing happens where Jerry comes over and tries to get an invitation inside.
Go get the authorities.
They don't listen to him. They don't let him in. They Amy and Charlie's mom listen to Charlie. So cathartic when that happens. And then this movie has fun with its vampire and vampire rules by having a whole sequence where Jerry, who, you know, fuck it, they know, he goes full mask off, goes into the backyard, digs up the gas line of the house and lights it, blowing up the house, just giving him free reign to go inside because it's not a house anymore, it just blew up. And so then they have to leave, and you have like a nice like chase scene where they think they got away. He throws the motorcycle at their van. It's all well done. But after the nice little like house blow up, car chase, mom in the hospital, Amy and Charlie go to Peter Vincent and successfully convince him this time that like he needs to do something to help them. But while they're having that whole talking to him moment, a package gets delivered, and you get a nice little moment where Charlie is like, do you normally get packages delivered at 9 p.m.? And it's revealed to be Christopher Mintz-Plasse vampire, Evil Ed vampire, who just got invited inside. And you have a whole fight sequence, which is really well done and I like. Peter immediately, like a bitch, runs to his safe room.
No, you don't. Come on, let's go.
And Amy and Charlie fight Evil Ed on their own and kill him. And in this movie, you know, it's just as tragic and sad. And then you get a kind of a reference to an extended sequence from the original movie where in the original Charlie and Amy run through a club to try to get away from Jerry. And they do that again in the remake. They run through a Vegas nightclub to try to get away from Jerry, only for Charlie and Amy to get separated. And Jerry, of course, gets her. And then from here, you kind of get a recreation of the third act of the original where Charlie goes back to Peter Vincent and convinces him to help him and go back and fight all the vampires. And so, you know, you have like the nice montage of them getting ready and like suiting up, and they go and they crash Jerry's hideaway house in the middle of the day. Great decision. They don't wait till night. None of that BS. They go during the day. The movie becomes Peter Vincent and Charlie using their gadgets and like the stakes they've made and like their vampire stuff to kill all of these vampires. Oh, and Peter Vincent makes the point of saying, I have like this ancient vampire stake that is like made from like this special type of wood. If you kill the original vampire with it, it'll cure like all of the thralls underneath him, which is fun, you know, a little bit of world lore drop. And Peter Vincent in the remake has much more of a family history with vampires. Like his parents are implied to have been killed by a vampire. Jerry implies it was him who did it. So, you know, a lot of that, which I appreciate. I like the little world building references. And yes, you get kind of a recreation of the third act of Fright Night where Charlie gets confronted with evil Amy before she's been fully turned, and she tries to bite him, but he manages to fend her off. And they again recreate the except in the remake, I like it, they use their shotguns to shoot holes into like the ceiling and the roof of the basement to like make light around them, to which all the vampires just kind of like stand there and is like, okay, we'll just wait for the sun to go down, you're still fucked. And then you get the reveal, which was hinted at in the first act with Peter Vincent's show talking about like having like a new fire effect, I believe. Charlie like puts on a mask and reveals he has a flame retardant suit on and is covered in like some sort of flammable liquid, lights himself on fire, and just tackles Jerry. And like, I like that. Something about that is really fun to me. And it also references a line that they said earlier where, you know, the only way a vampire like Jerry will ever be fully distracted to anything is if he was just on fire. This does lead to what I think is the worst shot of the movie that won't age well, and you get a full CG of like Jerry fully like vamped out. It doesn't look great. But, you know, it's whatever. I can accept bad CGI aging poorly if the rest of the movie around it is great. And I think it is. And then you get a little happy ending. Toni Collette wakes back up. They're moving the fuck out of Vegas. Charlie is still together with Amy. I think this is kind of a reference to that plot point in the original where like they're implied to lose their virginity to each other in Peter Vincent's penthouse. And Peter Vincent is not as traumatized. And it would have been a really cool first entry into a potential franchise, but goddamn, that didn't happen. I would love to see David Tennant come back as Peter Vincent. I know, unfortunately, Anton Yelchin passed away. He can't. But as a 2011 horror movie remake. This is so good. It's so fun. It's very crowd pleasing. Obviously, you know, it isn't like genre defining or anything like that, which the original does have, just from the nature of it being like the first movie to kind of do what it did. But just because you're the first to do that, I maintain doesn't mean you're the best. So I guess we should compare and contrast them and get to why I like the remake more than the original. There are aspects of the original Fright Night that I don't think have aged particularly great. And I don't mean like visual effects coming off silly or bad, which, you know, there's a little bit of that. But like I said, the Fright Night remake has that too. But there's like certain character cliches that I don't like, that I don't think age well storytelling wise, like the mom barely being in it and kind of just disappearing from the movie at a certain point, and also just dismissing her son completely. Everyone else in the original dismissing Charlie completely. There's a lot of just say this to them in this moment. Why wouldn't you just say, like for example, in the beginning, Amy's upset that Charlie seems to be blowing off losing their virginities with each other because he sees something across the street, which she views as being as an excuse not to go further. But as I was watching it internally and out loud, I was like, I kind of hate this, because all he needs to say is, hey, this weird man just moved a coffin into his basement. Isn't that strange? That's all he had to say before she got up in a huff and ran out. So there's a lot of like moments like that in the movie, which like that type of writing, maybe it's just me, I don't particularly find that enjoyable. The classic like gothic vampire isn't fully my jam. I do find it a little cringy how like somewhat like rapey he is, and also the needless like throw in of this 17-year-old girl is potentially the reincarnation of like your lost love, Mr. 1,000-year-old vampire. Like that felt a little like unnecessary to me, or maybe that's like something that didn't age well. Maybe that's just my sensibilities and I'm unfairly judging it for it, but I don't know, that turned me off to the original. And what I liked about the remake is that, you know, again, personal opinion, I like the type of vampire the remake is doing more, like that just shark out for blood type vampire. And also, while being that type of vampire, I mean, Colin Farrell is just so much more charming and seductive than the original Jerry 2, which is kind of funny to think about. The writing in the remake I also liked, because like I said, there's like that aspect in the original where it's like, if only this character would say something, or like stop just not believing this guy you're supposed to trust. The remake doesn't do that. The characters trust Charlie, so I'm not disappointed when he tells them it's a vampire, and then you have the scene of like where they immediately like go, well, come on in. Like, no, they're like, we're not gonna let this guy inside. And then I also like the way the remake kind of doesn't just fall in line with the vampire rules. Like, it establishes it has vampire rules, but then Jerry like already has his own knowledge of how to potentially subvert them, like blowing up the house inside with the gas line, things like that. You know, it's fun. They're having fun with the writing. And I will point out that the pedigree of filmmaker who did the remake, I think, has also kind of been proven. Like, this is the guy that went on to make I, Tonya and Cruella, and he has another movie coming out that I'm excited for, that now that I need to be able to say it, it's not going to come to me, but I'll throw up the title here. Supergirl. It was Supergirl. I don't know how I forgot it was Supergirl. God, it's going to be so good. So, I don't know. There were really good filmmakers behind this remake that wanted to tell a good, interesting, updated story that is a classic film that they think they had like a new, interesting take on, and they definitely accomplished it to the benefit of me as a audience member. I really like that remake. So after 50 minutes. So after rambling for that long and hopefully editing it down to something presentable that you all enjoyed and gets my point across and hopefully justifies my opinion, let's move on to the next movie, which is, again, another remake that I do think is, I don't want to say leagues better, but is just a better, more enjoyable film than the original, The Crazies. Now, basic logline for both the original and the remake is essentially a town is through a government mistake, exposed to and infected with what is essentially a rage virus, which is actually kind of interesting. I guess a lot of people credit fast-running, not actually dead rage zombies to 28 Days Later, when actually the original movie to try to do that plot was all the way back in 1973 with the Crazies. And so in the first original movie, through, like I said, a government mistake, this town and the water supply is exposed to a potential like societal destabilization agent for an enemy force called Trixie that is meant to drive the populace insane and just start indiscriminately attacking, rioting, and killing each other.
I've known about this for days.
We never thought it would happen.
But you notified me. You must have suspected.
Notifying you was precautionary. We never thought it was possible.
We've got to call the hospital in Unity. We need an ambulance for those kids.
And with that established, the movie begins with, you know, what the most extreme, messed up case of this happening would be. And a father, family annihilates his family in a house burning. And that's where it starts.
Mommy?
And then from here, the movie kind of goes between two perspectives throughout the rest of its runtime. It goes between like the government military response to this accident and our civilian main characters just trying to survive the scenario. And so our locals trying to survive the situation are our two leads who are firefighters, David and Clank. David's wife, Judy, who happens to be pregnant. A local teenager, Kathy, and her father, Artie, who meets up with them along the way. And so now these civilians are just trying to escape the town and get out of there because the military, realizing how everything is broken down, and after setting up like a special research science facility in the local high school, while also gathering up the town's residents and trying to usher them and hold them like captive in the local high school because they can't let the population get out. And as everything breaks down, martial law is declared in the city, and they actually prime up two B-52 bombers to drop a nuke on the town in case everything goes way too crazy.
Get me the president. We'll recommend that he instruct SAC to send a plane on a training mission over Evans City. Find out what size weapon it should carry to burn out the infected area.
And Judy, David's wife, was actually an assistant with the local town doctor who got conscripted into helping the military with this crisis medically. So Judy has some extra knowledge about what's going on and is able to inform our main characters that, you know, it's this virus. I took like a antiviral injection, so hopefully I won't get infected, but there's a chance you are all infected. We need to be careful. It might go airborne. And of course, Judy is right. Most of our main characters, you do, as the movie goes on, find out are infected. Artie tries to assault his daughter, leading to him hanging himself, which is actually very crossed, or like the sadness. Like it doesn't, the movie doesn't show it explicitly, but it's interesting seeing a movie at this time period pushing those kind of like extreme plot points in cinema, which was rare. And, you know, in a shell-shock response to that happening with her father, Kathy wanders outside and is killed by soldiers, which is sad.
Going insane anyway, man. Shoot her. My father doesn't. All right, everybody.
Clank eventually recognizes that he's infected, and in an effort to allow like David and Judy to try to get away, distracts soldiers and gets killed himself as well. And after that, when David and Judy wake up the next day, David becomes very aware that, Judy is definitely also infected. She starts giving like the signs, like has a fever, incoherent, you know, weirdly emotional, things like that.
You gotta remember, do exactly what I tell you. Promise, no matter what.
I promise, Dave.
You okay?
I'm fine. I'm ready. I'm fine, David, really. I want to rest somewhere.
Now listen to me. They're gonna be coming through here. If they don't see us, they'll pass us by. And we'll be on the outside. Huh? We'll be out.
And Judy, while in this state, wanders away from David and actually gets killed by a group of crazies. which I didn't expect that, the pregnant wife would die, but it's a pretty interesting tragedy pull. I gotta respect that script writing. And also they go the extra length of David realizing he should be infected, but he's not, meaning he is either asymptomatic or immune, but he keeps that to himself because he's seen how like fucked the military's response was to what was happening and just the warrant unneeded civilian death and whatnot. Like, they did not handle this scenario great. And this leads to kind of the movie's overall metaphorical political message, because keep in mind, this movie did come out in 1973. What is very relevant to history? The Vietnam War. People are very, not cool with the military and like the United States Army and whatnot at this point. So I can see how this movie could have been conceived as like an interesting message or commentary on what it would look like if like the US military came to a town in America and kind of treated the civilian populace almost exactly like they treated the Viet Cong in Vietnam. And it's fucked up, as it should be, as that scenario should be. And that's why I believe, the original movie spends so much time with the military response. Like, we see the general in charge, make decisions and like force a doctor or a scientist to come to the town and try to make a cure, and how that goes wrong. Like, that scientist does manage to make a cure, but for some reason the military had like the lab for researching the cure for the infection in the same area or in the same high school where they're keeping a bunch of crazies held captive. So of course they break out and kill that doctor and destroy the cure before he can inform anyone about it. Real self-fulfilling prophecies, like suffering from your own bad decision-making stuff, which, like I am mentioning, like a broken record, is definitely sort of supposed to be a metaphor reflection of what I assume to be America's military response to Vietnam and the Vietnam War. And the big nihilistic ending that the movie throws at you is that the entire town's populace is eradicated. David, who seems to be immune, is taken into military custody, his fate unknown. And the general, after the high school gets overrun and he's forced to kind of just liquidate everything, gets reports of like the town over suffering from the same tricksy infection. Like, someone managed to get there, and now he's just being moved there for the military to repeat that process again, and another town to suffer thanks to the U.S. military's, instant cranked to 11 bombastic, worst case scenario response to a mistake and lie they did and made. It is a good movie. It is interesting to go back and watch, especially when you realize, 28 days later wasn't the first to do a rage virus. This was almost 30 years before. And of course, George A. Romero makes really great movies with good political commentary. Like, that's what he's known for, Night of the Living Dead, legendary filmmaker. And I got to have to give the movie props on that regard. This movie definitely does social commentary and a political message and like speaking about humanity much more than the remake. So now when we get into the remake, and I've said all that, remember I'm talking about how it is as a movie. And as a movie, the 2010 Crazies unfortunately does lose kind of that overt political message and social commentary, but then makes up for it in being just a incredibly well-made, competent, and way more entertaining and thrilling like theater-going movie experience than the original is. Now, the 2010 remake, which was actually like written and directed by people that have not really done much of anything of note since, unlike Fright Night or the Evil Dead remake, which is kind of interesting. Like, these guys, this is the biggest movie that these people have made, and it's really good. It's a really good just horror movie rage virus scenario experience. I really like it, obviously. Like I said, unlike the original, this movie kind of lacks that kind of whole metaphorical social commentary about the Vietnam War that the first movie had, because, it's so far removed from that. But the government element is still a thing kind of in the movie, with the movie periodically cutting to spy satellite views showing us that like the Pentagon is paying attention to what is happening in this town. And like the original, this is also another military accident, except it's more explicit in that you see that it was a plane crash into like the water supply area for this town where they get all their water from. And Trixie got out in that plane in their water supply And the first people to like show symptoms were the people who got the water earliest, and it went down through the town, and that's the rate at which people start showing signs of infection, which is cool. It's fun writing like that. But man, I keep like kind of just jumping around, going on tangents. So let's try to get my mind straight. Our main character again is David and his wife Judy, and David is notably played by Timothy Olyphant, which is great. He's a great lead. He's awesome in everything he does. And so one day while David is watching over like a local community baseball game, you get the first sign that things are wrong in town when a local farmer comes walking onto the baseball field with a gun, and David is forced to shoot and kill him in self-defense. And then from there, David's wife Judy, who is a doctor in this movie, sees a family whose father is like out of it and acting weird. So she even starts noticing things are off. So it's like everything starts to come to a head pretty quickly in the beginning. Like I said, David is the town sheriff, and his deputy Russell are two, like, I guess, hero type characters in the movie. I did forget to mention there is like the sequence where this movie also has another family annihilation through burning sequence, but man, it is masterfully well done in the remake. Like the tension and the way the dad turns on the combo farm equipment to distract the mom, and then the mom hears the kid yell in the house and then rushes back in. It's a whole thing. It's really well done. And the movie does a good job of like showing you what happens when, like, I guess a military force just cuts off your town. Because the second David and Russell realize that something's up, the military cuts off their internet access, cuts off their radio and their phone access. No one can communicate out.
You know what?
What?
We're in trouble.
And just start rounding everyone up like in the first movie, except you explicitly see it. You explicitly see them throw everyone in trucks, bring them to the high school, quarantine people based off if they have a fever or not. It's actually a big, interesting set piece with the military co-opting the high school again. But it seems much more organized and like realistic to actual military procedure, which is interesting. But from there, David and Judy get separated because they mistake Judy running a slight fever because she's pregnant, also like in the original movie, as her showing signs of early infection. So David gets kind of forced in and almost forced into a truck with everyone else, but manages to get away and get back to town to the sheriff's station to, you know, load up, grab some guns, finding Russell there as well. And they team up to, you know, go save Judy. And from here, it becomes a full-on, like, sadness, Resident Evil type horror movie where David gets back to the high school and the military has just left all these people, you know, strapped to their beds as an infected man who's crazy goes around like stabbing everyone with a pitchfork, like the poster. Judy manages to escape and get rescued by David and Russell in that moment. They also come across the 911 operator who also tries to escape with them. Becca, who some of you might recognize as Killer Frost from The Flash. And then from there, like, the movie is just full of great set pieces as our four survivors now try to make their way from the high school out of town to the highway, past the military roadblock, back to the highway service station everyone was rounded up at, and then from there maybe escape town and try to do everything they can to get to Cedar Rapids. And yeah, you just get a lot of really great set pieces from them escaping the high school and walking back to their house where the remaining family of the man David shot in the beginning of the movie are trying to ambush them. From there, they then like try to drive out of town only to start being followed by a helicopter, and in an attempt to escape the helicopter end up in a car wash, which also leads to another great set piece where they're stalked in the car wash and everything's moving, and that's also really well filmed. Becca gets a shocking, quick, and sudden death that I really liked. It's really well done. A lot of really great moments, really great story beats, really fun theatrical type experience. And then from here, you know, with Russell fully crazed and gone, he eventually leading to kind of a recreation of the first movie where Russell, realizing he's too far gone.
If you cut through there, you can make it to the highway on the other side. They'll see us. No, they'll be focusing on...
Distracts the military and self-sacrifices himself getting killed. And it's actually well done. I like scenes like this when a character is given an emotional death in a horror movie, or a nice, well done self-sacrifice play. And then, of course, David and Judy make it back to the highway rest station, where they actually discover that the military had no intention of ever letting anyone get away. Which is fucked up, a horrible reveal, and does kind of tie in a bit more with the metaphor and the concept of the original movie, which is the military is fucked and will commit terrible human rights abuses against its citizens no matter where you are. And this leads to, after a final set piece with the last two infected and having to steal a truck, the reveal that this movie actually pays off something that the original didn't do. The original hints at like a nuke being dropped on the town and like that sort of destruction to wipe everything clean, but then doesn't deliver on it. Like, you see the plane take off, but then like the nuke never falls in the original. In this movie, the nuke falls, and it is a fun little final set piece to credits as they're desperately trying to get as much distance between themselves and the town as possible as a nuke goes off, and then like the shockwave hits them. I don't know. It's a lot of fun.
No.
And then, of course, you get like the final nihilistic bit where the satellite never stopped spying on them, and now Cedar Rapids will be given the same fate as the town David and Judy just came from. And I also think the movie does a subtle implication that David is immune, like the original David in the original, because he gets blood all up in a hand cut wound, so he should be, but he does not show any signs of infection by the time the movie's ended. So who knows, but that's fun. Maybe that's a little reference. I don't know. Both the movie's plots are similar from the survivor's main character's perspective. Like the journey that the surviving characters in the original The Crazies go through is very similar to the journey our main characters in the remake go through. The difference being that you spend, all of your runtime with them in the remake, and it really builds up the tension and the apocalyptic feel and we need to survive this horror scenario feel that the original doesn't really have, because, and I get that was the point, it keeps showing the military and has like main characters in the military and like these two separate plots that never really fully intersect. So the remake is a much more cohesive, just from point A to B thrilling survival plot, where the original is much more of a like 1970, like here's an interesting horror plot, but we added a bunch of metaphor and stuff on top of it, which is great. It's fine. I totally get what it's doing and I appreciate it and I really like it. It's just, as a movie and as a piece of thrilling horror entertainment, the remake is just much better, in my very humble opinion. Agree to disagree. I'm going to assume a lot of people kind of have that high regard of old movies are always better. Like, I don't know. That perspective of nothing good is made today, there's no more good movies today being made that are brand new or contemporary, always kind of irks me, because I watch good new movies all the time that are just as good as the classics. So yeah, I guess it's just like a personal pet peeve vendetta of mine, and that's my opinion on the original and the remake of The Crazies. And I hope the way I've compared and contrasted them has kind of made my reasoning as to why I like the remake more kind of apparent. And the other examples I've picked, I hope also kind of, hope you buy more into my point that just because something's new or a remake or a new version of something doesn't immediately mean it's bad and you should write it off. I'm not insane. I'm not going to say like if all the signs are there, like something like Madam Web, where there was no marketing for the movie at all, no production news, and anything you heard behind the scenes was bad. Like, yeah, there are movies that have writing on the wall. But if you don't have that with a movie and you're going in and all you have is, I'm dismissing it because it's a remake, or I'm dismissing it because it's a reboot or a redo or something, I don't think that's fair. I think every movie should be given as much of a fair shot as possible. And if you're someone who absolutely, finds the originals like beloved horror classics and haven't gone into or checked out or just dismissed the remakes, hopefully this, convinces you to maybe go in and reassess and try out some remakes or some new contemporary films you may have never seen or even given the time of day or thought to ever check out. All right, so that's been 40 minutes of me rambling on this movie and an outro. So, like I said, I never really know how to end these. So, if you disagree with my opinion, let me know in the comments. If you like my opinion, share my video, show it around. You don't have to agree with me. You don't even have to agree with me that you think the remakes are better. You can think the remakes are trash. I'm just trying to get across the point that I feel like modern day film discussion and film criticism is just really nihilistic and bitter and jaded. And I don't want to go as far to say toxic, but there's a lot of examples of it being toxic. And I don't like that. I want to kind of put forth more of an opinion of maybe check the thing out. Maybe good stuff still is being made. Maybe the only good movies aren't movies that are 30 plus years old, Anyway, maybe that makes me like an out of touch younger person, but screw it. That's my opinion. That's everything I have to say. Zero Progress, signing out. I will see you on the next video. I hopefully get done and upload and finished much faster than this one. This is the first time I tried to script something out and really like not just riff right after watching the movie, and it really fucked with my process. So yeah, hope you like it. Bye.